The refrigerator hums, that's the first thing. Right now in this kitchen, years later, it's the hum that brings it back every time. The specific frequency of that compressor motor, the way it sits just below the threshold of something you hear on purpose. It was in that room too, the overhead light above the table where they sat. It buzzed at a pitch that nobody else seemed to notice. I noticed, I don't know why, but I've never been able to shake it, that buzz. That sound that was there the whole time, like a heart beating in the ceiling. Nobody talked about it, nobody mentioned it, but I heard it and I still hear it. Every time the refrigerator hums, I hear that light, that room, that day. That's where this starts, with that sound. I want to tell you about a meeting, and I want you to know that I've never told this to anyone, not like this, not the whole thing, not with all the parts that matter and all the parts that nobody saw. And I think about it more than I should, even now. Even sitting here with the clock on the stove reading past midnight and the house so quiet I can hear the refrigerator thinking about what it's doing. That's where I am when it comes back to me. That's when it comes back strongest. Late at night. When everything else is still. When the only sound is the hum of something mechanical doing its job in the dark. That's when I go back to that room. That's when I see it all again. I'm going to tell you what I saw, not what you saw on television, what I saw from where I was standing, or sitting, or holding whatever it was I was holding that morning. I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you is different from what you think you know. It's not the same story. It's not even the same event. What happened on those cameras is only the surface. Only the part they wanted you to see. I'm going to show you what was underneath. I need to warn you, this is going to take a while, and I need you to stay with me because the part that matters comes at the end. Not the middle, not the part everyone talks about. The end, the part nobody saw. The part I'm only telling you now because I think you need to hear it. Because I think someone out there needs to know that the cameras don't tell the whole story. That the most important moments in any room are usually the ones that never make the footage. And I was there. I was standing in the right place, and I saw something I've never been able to forget. Let me tell you about the room first. You need to understand the room before you can understand what happened in it. You need to be there with me. In the room. Feeling what it felt like to be inside it. Because once you understand the room, you'll understand everything else. It was a hotel conference room, I know that much, but it felt like something else. It felt like a stage that someone had forgotten to finish building. Like they were still painting the backdrop while the actors were already walking on. Like the set wasn't quite ready but they were going to use it anyway because the show had to go on. The table was long, dark wood, the kind that looks important in photographs. The kind that makes you feel like whatever happens at that table matters. Like the wood itself has been part of important moments before. Like it remembers things. There were microphones at each seat, not the lapel kind, the kind that sit on the table and look like they're listening even when they're not. That's what I know about those microphones. They look like they're listening all the time. They make you feel like you can't say anything without it being recorded even when they're turned off. I felt that the whole time I was in there, that feeling of being watched by an object, by a machine, by something that had no face but was taking notes anyway, that hum of technology. That silent attention, you can't turn it off, you just have to live inside it. The lights were positioned in a way that made the whole room slightly too warm. I remember that because I was standing near the door and I could feel the heat on the back of my neck. The air conditioning was on but the lights were winning. You could see it in the way people kept touching their collars, adjusting their collars like they were trying to find a spot where the air hit. Everyone was warm. Everyone was uncomfortable in the same way. And nobody mentioned it. That's the thing about those rooms. Nobody ever says what they really feel. Nobody says it's too hot or the chair is uncomfortable or the microphone is too close to their water glass. They just adjust. They just find ways to cope without anyone seeing them cope. That's what you learn in those rooms. How to suffer quietly. How to be uncomfortable and not let it show. There were 2 chairs at the head of the table, one on each side. That's important because people forget that sometimes. They think of these things as happening in a line, like 2 people facing each other with a whole battlefield between them, but it was side by side, face to face. And the distance between them was shorter than it looked on television. I remember thinking that. I remember looking at the cameras and thinking the cameras are making this look like there's more space than there is. The cameras are lying about the distance. In person they were close enough to hear everything. Close enough that you could see the pause on someone's face if you looked too long. I didn't look too long, that's not my job. The chairs had been switched out at the last minute, I remember that. Someone had decided the original chairs were the wrong color for the cameras, so they brought in different ones. The new chairs had higher backs. They looked more formal. They looked like chairs you'd see in a courtroom or a movie about a courtroom. I don't know who made that call, but I remember thinking that whoever it was wanted the room to look a certain way. Wanted it to look like something specific. Like a place where something important was about to happen. And maybe it was important, I don't know. I was just the person with the clipboard near the door. I didn't get to decide what was important. I just got to witness it. I just got to stand there and watch things happen to other people. The papers were already on the table when we walked in. I don't know who put them there. They were stacked in the center, neat, symmetrical. I think someone placed them before anyone arrived so that when the cameras started rolling, the table would already look like it had been thought about. Like someone had been planning this for a long time. Like someone had prepared, and I remember thinking about that. About how the papers were already there before the people who would read them. About how the room was ready before the room was needed. That stuck with me, I don't know why, maybe because it reminded me that nothing in that room was accidental. Everything was placed, everything was planned, the papers, the chairs, the lights, the microphones, all of it was chosen, all of it was arranged, and I was the only one who wasn't arranged. I was the only one who was just there, just standing, just watching. And the coffee, there was a coffee urn in the corner, not a good one. The kind that makes coffee that has been sitting for a while. I could smell it from where I was standing. It smelled like a place where people had been waiting, like the smell of patience, like the smell of time that hadn't been used yet, like the smell of a room that was about to become something else. I don't know if you can understand what I'm saying, I'm not sure I understand it myself, but that smell. That stale coffee smell. It's in my head every time I think about that room. It's the smell of before, of right before everything happened. That's the room, that's what it looked like. That's what it felt like. You had to be there to know it, I was there. I need to tell you about the 3 things before we go further. I said I was going to tell you about them and I want you to know them early so you can watch for them. They're in here somewhere and I wanted you to hold them so they don't surprise you when they land, so you can see them coming, so you can understand why they matter. The first thing is that phone call. The antagonist took a call in the hallway before he walked in. I didn't see it happen, but I heard about it. Someone mentioned it in passing, the way you mention something you don't think matters. They said he stepped out of the green room and took a call in the hallway, 5 minutes before he was supposed to walk in. They said it was his wife or someone from his office. They said he looked tense while he was talking. They said the call lasted about 3 minutes. It didn't seem like anything at the time. I didn't think about it again until much later, until I understood what was actually happening that day. I would find out later why that call mattered, but at the time it was just a detail, just a thing that happened before the thing that mattered. Just a piece of information I filed away and forgot. The second thing is that person, in the room, in the back row. I didn't know who they were, nobody did, I don't think. They were just sitting there, not taking notes, not looking at their phone, not talking to anyone, just watching. I remember thinking they looked like they were waiting for something. Like they were expecting something specific to happen and they didn't want to miss it. But I didn't ask. You don't ask questions in that room. Not when you're the person with the clipboard near the door. Not when you're supposed to be invisible. You just watch and you wonder and you file it away for later. And later never comes until it comes all at once. That's what happened with that person. Later came all at once and everything shifted. The third thing is that moment, right before the cameras started. The antagonist was standing in the doorway. I could see his back from WH. I was standing, and for a second I thought he was going to turn around and walk away. His shoulders went a certain way, like someone changing their mind about something, like someone who had just realized they didn't want to be here. But then someone said something to him and he laughed and he walked in. He almost walked out. I don't know what changed his mind. I don't know who said what. I don't know if the person who spoke even knew what they were doing. But I remember the shape of that moment. The almost leaving. The way he stood in that doorway and for 1 second was a person who didn't want to be in that room. And then he wasn't. And then he was someone else. And I've thought about that moment more times than I can count. I've thought about what would have happened if he had walked out, if he had listened to whatever was telling him to leave. I've wondered about that more than I should. Those are the 3 things. I wanted you to know about them early. Because they're in here somewhere and I wanted you to be watching for them. Not to spoil anything. Just so you know what's coming, so you can see it when it lands. So you understand that I told you these were coming and I meant it. I want to tell you about how the antagonist came in. Because that was the first thing that told me something was different about this room, different about this moment, different about what was about to happen. He walked in like he owned the room, not the way you walk into a room you've been invited to. The way you walk into a room that you have decided is now yours, the way you walk into a room when you have already decided the outcome before you get there. His shoulders were back, his chin was up, his stride was even and unhurried. He nodded at the first person he saw and then he kept walking, and that nod meant something. It meant I'm here, it meant now this starts, it meant let's go. It meant the room is now a different room because I'm in it. It was a nod that took ownership. A nod that said everything before this moment is now over and everything after this moment is mine. He shook hands with someone near the table. The handshake was short, firm, the kind of handshake that says I'm not going to stand here and be nice to you, I'm going to stand here and show you something. The kind of handshake that takes charge without saying it. And then he sat down, and his chair made a sound, that sound, the one I'm holding onto, the scrape of it. The way it moved across the floor like it didn't want to stop. Like the chair was resisting him before it accepted him. I remember thinking that sound was going to be the thing I remembered about him, before anything else happened, before he said anything, just that sound, just that scrape. Just the chair telling me something about the person who was sitting in it. And the tie, you want to know about the tie, it was red, the exact shade of red that means I'm here and I'm not leaving, the kind of red that wants to be photographed, the kind of red that says something without saying anything. The kind of red that someone picks on purpose when they know they're going to be on camera. I remember the pattern on it. I remember the way the light hit it when he moved. I remember thinking he chose that tie on purpose. I remember thinking everything about him was on purpose. The tie, the walk, the nod, the handshake, the way he sat in the chair and the way the chair made that sound. All of it was chosen, all of it was performed, all of it was a message. But here's the thing, here's the first thing I want you to see, here's the thing the cameras missed. His hand, his right hand, it kept brushing the edge of the table, not touching it, brushing it, like he was checking it was still there, like he needed to feel the wood under his fingers to know where he was, to know that the table was real and he was real and this was real. I watched that hand do it 3 times in the first minute, 3 times, and I thought that's interesting because he looks confident. He looks like he walked in and decided this room is his now. He looks like he owns everything in it, but his hand keeps brushing the table like he needs proof. Like he needs to keep touching the edge of things to remind himself that they're solid, that they're there, that he's there. I don't know what it meant, I don't know if it meant anything, but I remember it, and I thought you should know about it too, because it's one of the things I saw that you didn't see. One of the tells, one of the things that was happening underneath the performance, and if you're watching at home you didn't see this. You saw a confident man walking into a room and sitting down, but I saw something else. I saw a man whose hand couldn't stop touching the edge of a table like he was afraid it would disappear. Now I want to tell you about the protagonist. The protagonist came in differently, not walking like he owned the room, walking like he had been there before, like he knew the room already, like he had seen this room in his mind 100 times before he ever walked into it, like the room was something he had already thought about, already prepared for, already decided how he was going to inhabit it. He was wearing a suit that fit the way suits fit when someone has worn a lot of suits. Not new, not showy, just worn in a way that means business. The way a suit fits when someone has stopped thinking about what they're wearing and started thinking about what they're doing. I remember noticing that. I remember thinking that his suit looked like it belonged to a different category than the other suit in the room. One of them was a costume, and one of them was just clothes. And I could tell the difference, even though I wasn't supposed to be looking at their clothes. He didn't shake hands with everyone. He shook hands with the people he was supposed to shake hands with. He nodded at the ones he wasn't supposed to shake hands with. And I remember thinking, that nod is different. That's not the same kind of nod the other one gave. That's a nod that says I see you and I'm not going to pretend I don't see you, but I'm not going to stop and talk to you either. That's a nod that says I'm in charge of what happens next, that I'm not reacting to you. I'm not responding to your energy. I'm doing my own thing and you're part of it whether you know it or not. He sat down and he didn't move for a while, he just sat there, still, watching. His hands were flat on the table, not holding anything, not touching the edge of the table like someone checking it's real, just flat, still, patient, like a person who had already decided what was going to happen and was now just waiting for it to happen. Like a person who knew something the rest of the room didn't know. And I remember thinking, this is the difference. This is what I'm seeing. One of them came in like a storm, like something that was just starting, like something that was building and hadn't peaked yet. And one of them came in like weather that's been here before and will be here again, like something that has already peaked. Something that is now just the aftermath of itself, and I didn't know which one was going to win. I didn't know anything about winning at that point. I just knew that they were different, and that the difference was going to matter. I should tell you now, I should tell you who I was in that room, because I've been holding it back and it's time. I was holding a clipboard near the door, that was my job. I was the person with the clipboard, I was supposed to keep track of things. Time, order, notes, who was where and when, who needed to be called when the break was coming. What page we were on, that's what the clipboard was for, and I was standing near the door because that was my spot. That was where I was supposed to be, out of the way, out of the frame, invisible, a person who was there but not really there. A person whose job was to watch but not be watched. And I was also the person who could hear everything, because of where I was standing, because of how the room was set up. I could hear the microphones when they weren't supposed to be on. I could hear the rustle of paper. I could hear the sound of someone breathing in a way that meant they were nervous. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking in a way that nobody else seemed to hear. I could hear things that the cameras couldn't pick up, and I want you to know that. I want you to know that everything I'm about to tell you, I heard it first. Before the room knew it was happening, before the cameras started rolling, before the performance began, I was already hearing things, already seeing things, already knowing things that nobody had told me to know, and I kept it to myself. I kept it all to myself because that was my job too, to see and not say, to know and not tell, to be the person who knows things that the cameras don't know. They started talking, and I need to take you through this carefully, because this is where it starts. This is where the thing I keep coming back to begins, and I want to show you what I saw that you didn't see. I want to show you the underneath of it, the part that was happening while the cameras were showing something else. The antagonist was talking first. Of course he was. He talked like he had a lot to say and not a lot of time to say it. He talked like every sentence was the most important sentence he had ever said. He used his hands when he talked. He leaned forward. He made eye contact. He was doing all the things that someone does when they want you to believe they are in charge of what's happening. He was performing, and he was performing well. Anyone watching would have seen a man who was confident and prepared and certain of himself. Anyone watching would have thought this was a man who had walked into that room and taken control of it. Anyone watching would have though. He was winning. But here is the thing I noticed. Here is the first tell I want to show you. Here is the thing the cameras couldn't see. His smile came 2 seconds too late. Every time he smiled after something the protagonist said, it arrived late. Like he was deciding whether to smile and then deciding to do it and then doing it. Like there was a process happening inside him that took a moment longer than it should have. The decision showed. The gap between what he was feeling and what his face was showing was visible if you were looking. And I was looking. I was the person with the clipboard near the door, and I was looking at his face more than I was looking at anything else. I was studying it, I was reading it like a document, and I could see the machinery. I could see the gears turning behind the performance. I could see the effort it took to look the way he was looking. The first time it happened, the protagonist had said something. I don't remember what exactly. It was something about how this meeting was an opportunity, something like that, and the antagonist smiled, and I watched his face and I saw the delay, I saw the half-second where he decided, where he looked inside himself and decided what the appropriate response was and then showed that response on his face. And then the smile came, and it was wrong, not wrong as in fake, wrong as in late. Like a translation of something he felt into something he showed, and the translation took a moment too long. Like something got lost in the translation. Like the smile was arriving from a distance and the distance showed. I want you to understand what I'm saying. I'm saying that I could see him thinking about his face while his face was happening. I'm saying that I could see the gap between the inside and the outside. I'm saying that the confidence was a surface and I was seeing what was underneath the surface. And what was underneath the surface was a man who was working very hard to appear like he wasn't working at all. And that was the first thing. The first tell. The first crack in the performance. The first moment when I understood that what I was seeing was not what I was getting. The meeting went on, they talked about things. I don't need to tell you what they said because you already saw that. You know what was said. You've seen the footage, you've watched the analysis, you've heard the commentators break it down into moments and meanings. What you don't know is what I heard. What you don't know is what was happening underneath. What you don't know is the thing that was happening in the space between the words. The thing only someone in that room could have seen. There was a moment, about 20 minutes in. The antagonist was talking about something, I don't remember what exactly, but his voice had changed. It was louder, it was more certain. It was the voice of a man who was building toward something, who was working toward a climax, and I could hear it in his voice that he wanted to win the room. He wanted everyone in that room to know that he was the most important person in it. He wanted the room to feel his presence. He wanted the room to know that he had taken it. And the protagonist listened. He didn't interrupt, he didn't argue, he didn't lean forward or raise his eyebrows or do any of the things that someone does when they're engaged in a battle of wills. He just sat there and listened, His face was still. His hands were still on the table, and he waited. He just waited, like someone who had all the time in the world, like someone who knew that waiting was the thing to do, like someone who knew that the best move was no move at all. And I remember thinking, he's not going to respond yet. I don't know how I knew, I just knew. I could see it in the way he was sitting. Like he was waiting for something specific. Like he knew something was coming and he was ready for it. Like he had seen this movie before and knew exactly when the scene was going to change. And the antagonist kept talking, and the protagonist kept waiting. And then the antagonist stopped, and he took a breath, and I watched his throat, I watched the way he swallowed. That's the second tell, I want you to see it. I want you to understand what I'm seeing here. He swallowed, one beat too late, after the protagonist said something. After every time the protagonist said something, he would respond, he would give his answer or his argument or his point, and then he would swallow. Like he was checking if his throat was still working. Like the words had surprised him and he needed to make sure he could keep speaking. The swallow came after the sentence was finished, not as part of it. It was a delay, a pause. A moment of the body saying something that the voice hadn't said yet. And I watched it happen again and again. Every time the protagonist spoke, every time the antagonist responded, that swallow, that beat too late, that moment of uncertainty that the body revealed even when the voice was certain. And I thought, that's interesting, because he sounds so confident, he sounds so certain. He sounds like a man who knows exactly what he's doing and why he's doing it, but his throat is doing something else. His body is doing something else, and nobody in that room was looking at his throat except me. Nobody was reading that tell, nobody was seeing the crack in the performance that I was seeing. I don't know why I was looking at his throat, I don't know why I noticed, but I did, and I've never forgotten it. And now I'm telling you about it, and you're the first person I've ever told. The protagonist hadn't moved much. That's what I keep coming back to, that's the image I hold on to when I think about that room. He hadn't leaned forward, he hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't done any of the things that someone does when they want to show they are winning an argument. He had just sat there, still, watching, waiting, being still in a room where someone else was trying very hard to be noticed. But here's what I noticed about him, here's one more thing. He had taken a sip of water, just one, right in the middle of something. At the exact moment when the antagonist had said something that was supposed to be a knockout, the antagonist had just finished making a point. A big point. The kind of point that someone makes when they want you to know they have the upper hand, and the protagonist took a sip of water. And I remember thinking, why did he do that? Why did he drink water at that moment? Why didn't he respond to what was just said? Why didn't he defend himself or push back or do something? Why water? And then I realized, he wasn't responding because he didn't need to. He wasn't defending himself because there was nothing to defend. He was waiting, and the water was a way of showing the weight. A way of saying, I'm not going to let you rush me. I'm not going to let you control the speed of this. I'm going to drink my water and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to wait for you to run out of things to say. And when you run out, I'll still be here, and you'll still be out there. And we'll see what that looks like. And the antagonist kept talking, and the protagonist kept waiting, and I could feel it. I could feel the room starting to shift. I could feel something changing in the air. I could feel the way the other people in the room were watching. I could feel them starting to understand what I was already starting to understand, that something was happening that wasn't what it looked like. That the performance was one thing and the reality was something else. The antagonist was working very hard, and the protagonist was not working at all. That's the difference I kept coming back to. That image, that feeling, one person working and one person not working. And the person who was not working was winning. The person who was not trying was beating the person who was trying very hard, and nobody in that room could see it except me, and the protagonist, and maybe one other person, the person in the back row, the one who was watching, the one who was taking the other notes. Now I need to tell you about the moment, the one that comes later, the one that changes everything, the one that I'm saving up for, the one that makes the rest of this story mean something. I said there was a person in the room. Nobody recognized them at the time. I want to go back to that. I want to tell you what I know now that I didn't know then. That person in the back row, the one who was just sitting there watching, not taking notes, not looking at their phone, just watching. I didn't know who they were when I saw them. I didn't know why they were there. They looked like they belonged. They looked like they had a reason to be there, but I didn't know what that reason was, and I didn't ask. You don't ask questions in that room. Not when you're the person with the clipboard near the door, not when you're supposed to be invisible. I found out later who they were. I found out later what they were doing there. And when I found out, everything shifted. Everything. The whole meeting looked different to me after I understood who that person was and why they were there. The pieces I had been holding separately suddenly fit together. The picture I had been building suddenly had a frame. They were a witness, not for the cameras, not for the press, not for the public, for something else, something that was going to happen after the meeting, something that was already being planned while the meeting was happening. They were taking notes, but not the kind of notes we take, not the kind of notes that go into reports or get filed away or get used in presentations. Different notes, notes about things that weren't on the microphones, notes about things that weren't on the cameras, notes about the tells. About the delays, about the swallowing, about the hand brushing the table, about the mile that came late, about everything that was happening underneath the surface. And I need you to understand what I'm saying. I'm saying that while the meeting was happening, while the cameras were rolling, while the world was watching what they thought they were seeing, someone else was seeing something else. Someone was watching what I was watching. Someone was keeping a record of all the things that didn't make the broadcast. Someone was building a case out of the moments no one was supposed to see. I don't know what that record is being used for. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know if it still exists or if it was used or if it's sitting in a folder somewhere waiting for a day that hasn't come yet. But I know it's out there. And I know that what I'm telling you right now is only part of what was seen that day. I'm only telling you what I remember. There was more. There was so much more. That's the first thing I said I'd tell you about. That's the first of the 3 things I wanted you to hold: the person in the back row, the witness who wasn't supposed to be there, the one who was watching and taking notes about the things nobody was supposed to see. I wanted you to know about them early, so you could watch for them. So when I came back to them, you'd understand why it mattered. There was a question, off mic, before the cameras stopped rolling. This is the moment, this is the win, this is the thing I keep coming back to. This is the thing that changes everything about how you understand what happened in that room, the thing that makes everything before it make sense, the thing that turns the whole story around. I need to set this up. I need to tell you how it got to this point. The antagonist was wrapping up. He was saying the things that someone says when they want the meeting to end on their terms. He was taking credit for things. He was claiming things had gone well. He was talking about what had been accomplished and what was going to happen next. He was doing all the things that someone does when they need to leave a room believing they won it, when they need to walk out feeling like the most important person who was there, when they need to believe that the performance was real. And the protagonist listened. He didn't argue, he didn't push back, he didn't say anything, he just sat there, still, waiting like he had been the whole time, still and patient and watching and waiting, not fighting, not pushing, just existing in the same space as the other person and letting that be enough. And then, just before the cameras cut, just before the microphones stopped recording, right in that moment when everyone was already starting to relax because they thought it was almost over, right in that moment when the room was already moving on in its mind, the protagonist asked a question. It was quiet, so quiet that I almost missed it, and it wasn't directed at the cameras. It wasn't a statement meant for an audience. It was directed at the antagonist. A single question, just one. A question that came out of nowhere and went somewhere the rest of the room couldn't follow. A question that was meant for one person and one person only. And I don't know exactly what it was. I don't know the exact words. I was too far away and the microphones weren't picking it up clearly. But I heard enough. I heard enough to know. I heard the tone of it. I heard the way the antagonist reacted to it. I heard the change that came over the room in the space of that one question. I heard everything I needed to hear. The question was about something specific, something personal, something that had come up earlier in a different conversation, something the antagonist should have known about, something he should have had an answer for, and the protagonist knew that. That's why he asked it. That's why he asked it at that moment. Right when the cameras were about to cut. Right when the room thought it was almost over. Right when the antagonist thought he had won. And the antagonist didn't have an answer. I could see it in his face. I could see the moment when he understood that he didn't have an answer, the moment when the whole performance shifted because someone had just asked him a question that he could not answer, the moment when the mask slipped just slightly and something underneath it became visible, something the cameras were about to stop seeing, something that was about to be cut off before the world could witness it. And that was the moment, that was the win. Not the speeches, not the posturing, not the confidence, not the red tie and the firm handshake and the chair that scraped when he sat down. The win was a question that the antagonist had no answer for. The win was a quiet moment when the protagonist showed that he knew something the antagonist didn't know. The win was a single moment that no camera captured. A single question that changed everything. A single sentence that ended the game before. Ray, the game knew it was over. And the cameras were already cutting, and the room didn't see it, and the world didn't see it, but I saw it, I was right there. I saw the way the antagonist's face changed. I saw the way his body shifted in the chair. I saw the way he took a breath that was not a confident breath. I saw the way his hand brushed the table again, harder this time, like he was trying to hold onto something solid because the ground had just shifted under him. And I knew who had won that room. I knew it in that second. I knew it before anyone else did. And I have never been able to tell anyone until now. I want to stay on that moment for a second, because it's the moment I come back to. It's the moment I hold on to. It's the reason I'm sitting here at midnight telling you this. It's the thing that makes this story worth telling, worth keeping, worth finally saying out loud to someone after all these years. The antagonist didn't know it yet. In that second he didn't know. He was still performing. He was still smiling his late smile. He was still brushing the edge of the table. He was still talking about what had been accomplished and what was going to happen next. He was still sure of himself. He was still walking out of that room believing he had won. Believing the whole thing had gone the way he wanted it to go. But I could see it, the crack, the hairline fracture in everything he was showing. He didn't have an answer, and somewhere inside him he knew he didn't have an answer. He might not have known it consciously yet. He might not have admitted it to himself. But somewhere in his body, somewhere in the part of him that reads rooms and knows when something is wrong, he knew. And the protagonist knew that he knew, and now I knew, and nobody else in that room knew. Because they weren't looking at the right thing. Because they were looking at the performance and not at the underneath of it. Because they didn't have the angles I had. The protagonist didn't celebrate, he didn't gloat, he didn't say anything else. He didn't do anything that would let the room know what had just happened. He just stood up, he shook hands, he walked out, the same way he had walked in, still, patient, knowing, like a person who had just confirmed something they already knew and was now free to go on with the rest of their day, like a person who had finished a task and was moving on to the next one. No excitement, no relief. Just stillness completing itself. And the antagonist kept talking, even after the cameras were off, even after the microphones had stopped. He kept talking to the room, to whoever was left, telling them what had happened, explaining his position, making his case because he still thought he had won, because he didn't know that the win had already happened, because he didn't know about the question, because he didn't know that someone had seen. Because the cameras had cut before the moment that mattered, and the world would never know what really happened in that room. And I stood there near the door with my clipboard and I watched him talk to the empty air and I felt something I couldn't name. Something between pity and awe. Pity because he didn't know. And awe because the protagonist had done it so quietly. So simply, so completely, without anyone seeing, without anyone knowing, just a question, just a moment. Just the thing that mattered most, hidden in plain sight, ending the game in the last second before anyone realized the game had been played. The room emptied. I stayed near the door. I was still holding the clipboard. I was still the person with the job. But something had happened to me in that room that I didn't have a word for yet. Something had shifted in me. Something had seen something I wasn't sure I was supposed to see. Something that changed the way I understood rooms and people and performances and the space between what we show and what is true. I walked out through the hallway and I passed the coffee urn. The smell hit me again, that stale coffee smell, like nothing had changed, like the world was still the same as it was an hour ago, but it wasn't, I knew it wasn't, everything was different now, everything. The hallway looked the same. The coffee smelled the same, but the world inside me had shifted and I didn't know how to put it back. And I got in my car, and I sat there for a while, in the parking lot, I don't know how long enough that someone asked if I was okay, long enough that I had to say yes even though I didn't know what okay meant, long enough that I had to pretend I was a person who had just finished a normal job and was going home like a normal person instead of a person who had just seen something that changed the way they understood everything. I had to act normal. I had to pretend I was fine. Because that's what you do in those jobs. You don't tell people what you really felt. You don't tell them what you really saw. You just go ho. Me and sit in your car and try to figure out what happened. And I drove home and I didn't say anything to anyone, and I didn't write anything down, and I didn't call anyone, I just drove, and I thought about the question, and I thought about the way the antagonist's face looked when he didn't have an answer, and I thought about the protagonist sitting there. Still, patient, knowing, like a person who had just played a game that no one else knew they were playing and had won it without anyone noticing the game was happening. And I thought about all the things I had seen. The tells, the delays, the cracks, the almost walkout, the person in the back row, Everything. All of it swirling around in my head like something I couldn't put down. I couldn't sleep that night. I don't know if I could sleep for 2 nights. I remember lying in my bed and the hum of the refrigerator coming through the wall. The same sound I'm hearing right now, the same frequency, the same hum, and I kept thinking about the overhead light, the buzz of it, the way it sat just below the threshold of something you hear on purpose. The way it was there the whole time and nobody else noticed. The way it hummed and nobody said a word. The way it kept humming while everything else was happening. While the speeches were being given and the cameras were rolling and the question was being asked that would change everything. And I kept thinking about the person in the back row, the witness, the one who was taking the other notes, the notes about the things nobody was supposed to see, and I wondered what they were writing down. I wondered what they saw that I didn't see. I wondered if their notes would ever matter or if they would just sit in a file somewhere forever. I wondered a lot of things. I wondered about the phone call too. The one the antagonist took in the hallway before he walked in. I wondered who called him and what they said, and whether it changed anything. Whether it made him walk in when he almost didn't. Whether it made him sit in that chair and answer questions he couldn't answer. I want to tell you about the almost walkout. The third thing I said I'd come back to. The moment when the antagonist almost left before the cameras started, the shape of that doorway, the way his shoulders looked from where I was standing. I said he was standing in the doorway. I said his shoulders went a certain way. I said I thought he was going to turn around and walk away. And I want to tell you what I think about that now. Years later, from this kitchen at midnight, looking back at all of it from a distance that makes some things clearer and some things more confusing. I think he almost left because he knew something. I think he knew something in his body that he didn't know in his head. I think the part of him that reads rooms, the part of him that knows when something is wrong, I think that part was telling him to leave. I think that part was saying you don't want to go in there. You're not ready. You're not going to win this. You know something is off and you don't know what it is and you should listen to that feeling and walk away. But something changed his mind. Someone said something, or he decided on his own, but he went in. And he sat down, and he did what he always does. He performed. He smiled his late smile. He brushed the table. He talked and talked and talked and he worked so hard to make everyone believe he was in charge of what was happening. But his body knew before he did. His body tried to save him and he didn't listen. And I think about that a lot. I think about how sometimes the body knows things that the mind doesn't, and how sometimes we ignore that knowledge because we don't know how to listen to it, and how sometimes the moment we almost walk away from is the moment we need most, the moment that would have changed everything if we had just turned around and left, but we don't, we go in. We sit down, we do the thing we were going to do anyway, and we find out what happens when we stay. He almost walked out, and he didn't, and I was there to see what happened when he didn't. I want to tell you something else now, something about me, not about them, about me, about what this did to me, about what it's still doing to me, about the thing I carry around with me every day that I can't put down. I can't watch the footage, I can't watch it when it replays. I see the clips sometimes, online, on the news, people sharing them, talking about them, analyzing them, breaking them down into moments and meanings, and I can't watch, I turn away, or I scroll past, or I change the channel. I do whatever I have to do to not have to see it. Because I know something they don't know. I know what it looked like from the other side. I know what I saw when the cameras weren't looking. I know about the smile that came late, and the throat that swallowed late, and the hand that kept brushing the table like it needed proof. I know about the question. I know about the crack. I know about the almost walkout and the person in the back row and the way the protagonist just sat there and waited and won without anyone knowing he was playing a game. And I don't know how to watch myself knowing that. I don't know how to sit there and see them on a screen and know that what they're showing isn't what was. And I can't tell them. I can't say you got it wrong, you got the whole thing wrong, because then I'd have to explain how I know. And I can't explain that, not fully. Not without telling you everything I just told you. Not without sitting down and going through every moment and every tell and every detail until they understand that the story they think they know is only part of the story. The smaller part, the part that was designed to be seen. So I just don't watch, I turn away, and I think about the hum of the refrigerator, and I think about the buzz of the overhead light, and I think about the room and I keep it to myself, I keep it all to myself, like I was trained to do, like it's my job to see things and not say them, but this is different. This is something I saw that I don't think anyone else saw, something that changes the whole story, something I've been holding for years. Until now, until tonight, until this kitchen at midnight, until this moment where I'm finally telling someone, telling you the whole thing, everything, from the smell of the coffee to the scrape of the chair to the moment when the cameras cut and the winner walked out and the loser kept talking to no one. Everything I saw, everything I know, everything I've been carrying. I don't know why I'm telling you this, I don't know what made me start, but I did, and I've never told anyone this, not the way I'm telling you, not the whole thing, not with the question and the tells and the person in the back row and the almost walkout. Everything, all of it, from the beginning to the end. The whole thing I saw with my own eyes from my own spot near the door with my clipboard in my hand and my ears open to everything the microphones couldn't pick up. But I'm telling you now, because I think you needed to know. Because I think there's someone out there who needs to know that the cameras don't see everything, that the broadcast is only part of the story, that the win happens in the moments nobody's watching, that the most important things in any room are usually the things that don't make the footage. The pauses, the questions, the tells, the almost walks out. The things that someone notices because they were standing in the right place at the right time, and they were paying attention to things no one told them to pay attention to. And if you're the person who needed to hear that, then I'm glad I started talking. I'm glad I finally decided to say this out loud. To someone, to you. I'm going to stop now. I think I've said what I needed to say. I'm sitting here in this kitchen and the clock is still reading past midnight, and the refrigerator is still humming, and I'm still holding onto a room I was never supposed to be important in. A room I was only supposed to stand near. A room I was only supposed to witness. A room where things happened that I was not supposed to understand, but I understood them anyway because I was there, and I was watching, and I was the person who saw what nobody else was looking at. I was just the person with the clipboard near the door. I was just the person who could hear what the microphones couldn't pick up. I was just the person who saw what nobody else was looking at. The tells, the delays, the cracks in the performance, the question that ended everything. The witness in the back row, the almost walkout, all of it. And that's all I was, that's all I'll ever be, a person who saw something, a person who remembers something, a person who can't watch the footage because the footage is a lie and knowing that has made everything different, has made me different, has made me someone who knows something they don't teach you, something they don't put in the manuals, something you only know if you were there, if you were standing in the right place, if you were paying attention to the things nobody told you to pay attention to. But I saw it, and now you did too.